What's going on, everybody? It is overreaction time once again, and welcome to this third edition of the show. I am your host, Simon Samano, and look who I got with me this week. It is the MMA media titan himself, Mike Bohn. Mike, what's good, man?
Everything's good. I'm happy to be here for the first time, and yeah, just 3 weeks on the road, so it's good to be back here in my home base for the first time in a while.
Yeah, for those of you who've been following on MMA Junkie, Mike's been in Saudi Arabia for Battle of the Titans PFL pay-per-view. Then the following week went to Abu Dhabi for UFC 308 and just came back yesterday from UFC Edmonton. So, man, we appreciate you for joining the show. I hope you're ready for this. You feel good? You feel ready?
I am ready. I've seen, the bar has been set high by the first two guests on the show, but I'll try to maintain that status at minimum.
All right, man. Well, let's get this thing going. Kamikaze, you know what time it is. Hit it.
Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid.
MMA Junkie AI.
Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Mike. We're going to start right now with UFC 310, which we were set to have what looked like a main event between Belal Muhammad defending his welterweight title against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now, we know Belal had a foot infection. He's out. All right, he is out. And right now, as of this recording, there's a lot of talk about what's going to happen with Shavkat, what's going to happen with that main event in general, okay? But one thing we do know is that Machado Garry is fighting Joaquin Buckley the following week in the main event for UFC Tampa. And so with that in mind, I'm going to hit you with this one, Mike. The UFC dropped the ball by not booking Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Machado Garry at UFC 310.
I don't think that's an overreaction. I mean, I think if you look at maybe the most interesting style matchup, undefeated versus undefeated, that would have been a great way to sell the fight. Would have been pretty intriguing for the fans. You don't see people rally behind Machado Garry too often, just given his relationship with the fan base in recent years. But for this fight, I felt like there was a lot of support from it, from fighters, fans, all that stuff. I know the teams on both sides were interested. Both fighters seemed interested. As far as I know, that fight was pretty much made before all this stuff happened with Belal Muhammad, and they do need a main event for Tampa. Like, they were sorting through a few different options. They wanted Ian Garry and Colby Covington, and Usman was talked about, and then they ultimately settled with Buckley because Garry was like, I just want to fight anyone. Like, I want this to be my date. So yeah, it would have been easy, I'm sure, easier for them to find a replacement main event for that Tampa card than it is for this UFC 310 card. But I think that would have been the best fight to make, but ultimately the secondary option is looking like Kamaru Usman,
right?
And he's obviously got a decorated history and a legacy in this weight class. So if you're looking for name value, he's probably a decent choice too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you hit the nail on the head for me. The reason why I'm so upset that this fight wasn't made is how many times do you get undefeated rising star versus undefeated rising star with UFC gold at stake? Because you know they're going to attach an interim title to it. I mean, that's a hell of a way to end the year with your numbered events. And so like that it just seems like they dropped the ball. And if the replacement ends up being that it's Kamaru Usman, I don't know, man, that just feels like Usman coming off his losing streak. Do you really think Usman versus Rakhmonov, like, does Usman deserve an interim title shot?
It's one of those weird ones where you're like, you look at his history, right? And that's what you're saying he's deserving off. But like, given the 3 losses in a row, I don't know. It's tough to, like, the second Leon Edwards fight in England, or the third overall between them, was like, pretty even, majority decision. We know it was happening in the second fight before the head kick. He was winning handily. And then you look at what he did against Khamzat Chimaev on extremely short notice, up a weight class, like, commendable stuff there. So I don't know, like, I think you could sell it based on all those things, but on paper, it doesn't look great. I'd have to look into my records and see how many people have fought for a UFC title, interim, undisputed, BMF or otherwise, on 3 losses in a row. It's probably a very, very short list. There's been a lot of people who've had 2 in a row, but 3, not many. So it would be a little unprecedented. Obviously a desperate scenario here, but yeah, we'll see if they ultimately do that, because you hear some stories too about the sparring that's happened between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Kamaru Usman down there at Killcliff over the years, and I don't know how keen Usman would be to do this fight if those are true. I'm not reporting anything factual here, but you hear whispers, and but for him, there's a lot of upside there. I don't know if you're Usman, there's going to be a better opportunity that's going to come along for you than this.
Do you think, real quick before we move on to the next thing, do you think the UFC, I mean, the favorable outcome I guess you would like here is for Shavkat to win, right? He's your rising star, but what happens if Usman actually pulls this off? I mean, then what?
I mean, from what we hear, there's this deleted podcast, right, between Bilal Muhammad and Kamaru Usman that happened on, Usman and Henry Cejudo's show. And from the whispers you hear, it sounds like there was a physical altercation between those two. So there is some heat there. I think you could build that fight. But yeah, it does feel like an old head matchup. And I don't think the UFC matchmakers in particular are loving dealing with this welterweight division right now, because it's really tough to get these older crop, the Colby Covingtons, the Kamaru Usmans to take these fights against these other guys, which ultimately they either fend them off, like you saw at lightweight with like Dustin Poirier and Benoit Saint Denis, or they lose and you get turnover, which is badly needed in this weight class. So yeah, I think in terms of like moving things forward, having Bilal and Usman would be not great, but given their history, given Usman's resume, I think it is a sellable fight.
All right. Well, listen, I just wish they had gone with Ian Machado Garry and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Just a fantastic matchup right now at the right times in their careers. But hey, we're going to get what we're going to get. As of right now, we don't know what we're going to get, but it is looking like it's going to be Usman against Shavkat, but we shall see what happens probably really soon here. So, all right, man. Well, we're going to move on to the next thing, but it's touching on the same thing because you just hit on some themes that are probably going to be relevant to the next thing I'm going to hit you with here. All right. Now that we know that Ian Machado Garry is fighting Joaquin Buckley, that means we know that Ian Machado Garry is not fighting Colby Covington, which is a fight that has been talked about for a while because they've been beefing for the past several months. I don't know why that fight's not happening, man. I think we know it's on one side and not the other. So I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this, dude. Colby Covington, he should be cut from the UFC.
I do think that's an overreaction just because he's going to have to take a fight at some point, you think. I mean, he's had one fight in like, 3 years at this point. It's, from what I've heard, the reason that fight didn't happen is Colby Covington's side said he's still dealing with injury. I don't know what injury. I don't know if he's still hurt from the Leon Edwards fight a year ago or 11 months ago, or if something new has happened since then. But that's allegedly why. You saw me ask Dana White in Abu Dhabi, like, you've said in the past Colby Covington doesn't turn down fights, but Ian Garry posted a signed contract with Colby Covington's name on it. So does that mean he turned down the fight and he essentially just danced around the answer and didn't give you a straight answer? So I don't know. Like, we obviously know Colby Covington has a soft spot somewhere in the UFC's heart or Dana White's heart. We could speak on the many reasons why that may be. I think one of them is associated to what's going on in the United States on Tuesday. But nevertheless, I think if you can keep him around and get him to do an Ian Garry fight, get him to fight one of these guys, the value of him losing that fight potentially to one of those guys is big for the division, as opposed to just cutting him and letting him go. And then I don't know what his future even looks like, if a PFL would even want him or if he would just retire at that point. So I do think it's an overreaction just because it does feel, even if it's just to see him lose and get someone else over, there is some value in Colby Covington. But how long does the saga go on? And how long is he going to sit out? Can you even, classify him as an UFC fighter at this point?
I mean, my goodness, man. I mean, listen, dude, I don't know. I guess the value he has to the company right now is putting someone over because hell, if you look at his resume, he's got no value whatsoever. I mean, the dude hasn't beaten anybody on the UFC roster since Rafael dos Anjos back in 2018. He's got a win over Jorge Masvidal back in March 2022. But dude, I mean, I don't get it. Like, I don't understand what the appeal is with Colby at this point, just from a fighting perspective. And then, everything outside. I mean, even if you look, like, I don't go to Colby Covington's Instagram very often, but I did before this segment. There's nothing really on his page for the past several months that has anything to do with fighting. Like, what is even his interest level in fighting at this point? Everything is all about Trump and the campaign and the election. Does this guy even care about fighting anymore?
I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem necessarily like he's super eager to get back in there. You hear him every time he does an interview, right? And he tries to say how important this is for his life and, how much he's training and this and this and this. But yeah, you just have to look at the resume. You laid it all out there. It's pretty apparent what's going on. But that's also why I'm kind of compelled to see him fight again against one of these guys, because either we're just like, we see him say he did fight Ian Garry and he just gets destroyed. You're like, okay, he's clearly past whatever prime he had and can't hang with this new generation of welterweights, or he wins and he finally has a relevant win for the first time in like half a decade, which you could work with somehow promotionally. But yeah, I'd just like to see him fight one of these new generation guys, Jack Della Maddalena, whoever you can get him in there with, just to see if he's like even capable. And if he gets his ass kicked and knocked out, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who would love to see that.
Yeah, there are. And of course, again, with someone like him, like the flip side is if Colby were to actually pull off a win, you talk about this division needing turnover. I mean, the last thing we also need is like a Colby Covington victory over, one of those guys. But listen, if you're going to do the fight, you give me something that's sellable. Right now would have been the time. It would have been the time for Colby Covington against Machado Garry based on everything that they've had going on on social media and talking trash to each other. Now was the time. I don't know if I'm gonna care about it very much, in several months or whenever it may or may not happen. But
it is what he goes back to Miami in the first quarter of next year, and he's not on that card. I think that's pretty telling.
That'll be very telling. Yeah,
in fighting anytime soon.
Yeah, that would be very telling. That's a good point. Well, we'll see what happens with the career of Colby Covington. I'm ready for us to move on from him altogether, but I know that's not going to happen. So we'll see what happens, man. All right. Moving on to the next thing. Brandon Moreno this past Saturday at UFC Edmonton. You were there. Had a spectacular performance against Amir Albazi. Pretty much swept it. Was it clean sweep? It was 2 50-45s and a 49-46, or was it all 40 50-45?
So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just an absolute brilliant performance. And so, listen, I'm going to go ahead and hit you with this one straight up. Brandon Moreno has another UFC flyweight title reign in him, and this one will last a while.
I'd say not an overreaction to the first part, but an overreaction to the second part. I'll go with that if that's fair, if that's within the rules of this game.
It's within the rules. You can do whatever you can. It is well within the rules for you to hedge however you want. I'll just tell you straight up. I'll elaborate here. What I said last week on this show was that I thought the break, the layoff, the hiatus that Brandon Moreno took for the past 8 months was exactly what he needed, because I felt before that fighting Deiveson Figueiredo 4 out of 5 fights, that must have been so exhausting, man. Like fighting the same opponent over and over again. It's hard. It's mentally draining. It's how do you get up for the same fight over and over? And it was at a time when he's still developing. So I thought he needed this break. And man, that performance we saw on Saturday, I saw a Brandon Moreno that was in a flow state, dude. Just an absolute flow state. He looked brilliant.
He did. He looked exceptional. And I agree with everything you said there about the time off. You talked to all the people around him. I mean, he's there in like extremely cold Edmonton, forcing him to do an outdoor face-off in like freezing cold. And he afterwards is like, I love this energy. Like, this is, getting me hyped up and stuff, when like really in that scenario there
was not a lot of energy.
No, they're the night before cutting weight. Like, that's almost dangerous to put like fighters with their compromised body state in that sort of weather outside for like 15 minutes. But he was so joyful about it. So that really told me a lot about where his mindset was at. And then he went in there and the performance matched everything he was saying all week. So yeah, I mean, you could throw him in a title fight right now if Kai Asakura wins. It's hard to do that for sure, given the Brandon Royval fight that happened earlier this year in Mexico, and his nice win since then against Tatsuro Taira. He's got a pretty strong resume, but him and Moreno are both kind of in the same predicament at flyweight here. Like, they have the 2 losses to Pantoja, and it's like, unless he loses and Kai Asakura gets big turnover in this division, it's a little bit rough. I don't know exactly where they're going to go. Obviously, Moreno has the star power and the name and everything in Mexico, so he's got as good a chance as anyone. And I do think he will fight for that title eventually, whether it's the next fight or the fight after. He's got a great chance of winning against anyone, even Pantoja, despite their head-to-head record. And then who knows if he can hold it. I mean, you look at the 2 losses that he had, they're both split decisions, like, that led to this layoff. It's not like it was like, oh, I got finished back-to-back, I need a break. This is like, he could have easily won those fights, and we're looking at everything different right now. So I don't think he's far away, but these flyweights are so good, man, and it's so competitive that do I feel like anyone can have a super long reign right now? Like, any fight could be a split decision, and any fight could go either way on the scorecards, especially with how we've seen judging lately. So it's possible. I think him winning the belt, definitely realistic. Holding it, going to be a tougher task.
I can see him winning it. And when I say a while, I mean maybe like three title defenses. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. That's a long time.
In flyweight.
At flyweight, that's a long time in this division, man. I mean, if you can hold it for 2 or 3, title defenses, I mean, you're a long-standing champion in this division. So let me ask you though, man. So if it's not a title shot for Moreno, do you run it again with Royval? Is Is that the fight that happens, and then the winner takes on the winner of Pantoja Asakura?
Yeah, you could do that. He mentioned Tatsuro Taira, which I think could be a fun fight. That's a fresh opponent for him, of which there's not many.
What he probably needs is a fresh opponent because he's fought so many guys on
that's
rematches and trilogy.
After this fight too, like, you know, having someone new in Amir Albazi was really motivating for him and allowed him to kind of go through a training camp not feeling like it's so monotonous. So like having to watch tape of yourself fighting the same guy multiple times over for a whole training camp, I can't imagine what that's like. So I think that would maybe be like the best thing for him in terms of motivation and trying to get another performance that looked like what he did Saturday. So I think that's a good choice for sure, but it depends. Like, we got to wait till December 7th and see if Asakura can win this. If he does, like, even though Pantoja has done great work, I don't feel like they're going to be rushing to give him an immediate rematch, even though he'd probably warrant it. So I don't know. A lot hangs on this December 7th fight.
Yeah, I mean, so my thing, maybe my reaction here with Moreno is a little bit. I got a little bit of a soft spot for Brandon Moreno. Man, he's such a breath of fresh air. You know, I mean, Brandon Moreno essentially he's a dork who's a hell of a fighter. I mean, he's a Funko Pop collector. He's a Lego collector. Like
Pokemon cards now too.
Pokemon cards. I mean, dude, this guy, you know, his celebration afterwards, his goofy face, just leaning into that, like that. I don't know, man. That's why I have a soft spot for Moreno. Yeah, I want to see him do well. You know, it's gonna be tough, I know, but I feel pretty good. I feel like we saw a brand new fighter on Saturday. And that's why I feel good about him having another title reign. And I think he can hold it for 2 or 3 title defenses. But hey, we'll see. You know, we'll see how it plays out. It's a heck of a division, you know, and it has been for the past few years now. So we'll see what happens. All right, man. Moving on to the next thing. A little bit more fallout from UFC 308 from 2 weeks ago. All right. Now we know, coming out of that event, we know what Dricus Du Plessis wants. We know exactly what he wants. And I'm here to tell you right now, man, Dricus Du Plessis wanting Khamzat Chimaev instead of Sean Strickland is a big mistake.
Ooh. No, I don't think that's an overreaction. I mean, I think given the way Khamzat looked, if he shows up healthy like he did in Abu Dhabi, that might be the best middleweight on earth and a very scary guy. So, yeah, I think if you're talking financially, no, it's not, because I think
financially, I got you. Well,
if you're the champion, Dricus, I think it sells more than Sean Strickland, honestly. I do.
Sure, but when you say financially too, think long term. We're talking about a victory keeping you champion longer. And we both, I think, are on the same wavelength here that Khamzat Chimaev shows up the way he did against Rob Whittaker, right? Like, I don't know about that being the smart call out here, dude. I mean, I respect it. I respect it. I certainly respect it, but I don't know that it's smart.
Yeah, if he can parlay, I guess, 2 paydays and get Strickland first, I'm sure he's more confident in that fight, given how their first one went and the changes he can make. And I think Dricus has improved since then. But yeah, like right now, you never know what could happen with Khamzat between then. Like, you never want to push something off too late. Maybe something else happens with him, or he loses momentum via one of a million possible scenarios. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think for the sport and the fans, that's definitely the right call to make. For Dricus on a risk factor side, yeah, it's definitely a bigger one. So yeah, I'm curious to know if they're actually going to go in that direction. I was hoping Dana White would come speak to us in Edmonton, because he said,
what's your gut tell you though? What's your gut tell you?
What do you mean that he didn't come?
No, what's your gut tell you? Will they go in that direction?
I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on, I guess, behind the scenes here. Like, I know originally they wanted Dricus and Sean Strickland in Australia, and I don't think the government of Australia wants Sean Strickland back there after he, you know, had like a punched a fan or all that stuff that happened, the stuff he said on the microphone. And they're paying big money to the UFC to do these events in Australia, so they might have a little more influence, you know, about turning
that's
someone
an issue.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know what they do if, like, you know, Australia's government's pretty strict. I don't know if Khamzat could get in there either. So there's a whole, like, he's got his litany of issues. So they're kind of in a pickle right now. I don't know how long they're wanting to wait for South Africa, if that's in play, if they can get something like that on the table, or if they'll have to go earlier. So there's a lot of moving parts here, but they're going to have to make a decision here, like, soon, as far as what they're going to do with Dricus. But I think if they could make it happen with the snap of their fingers with no issues, I think they would go Khamzat, but you also hear and see Sean Strickland's tweets, and he seems to think he's been given a promise and their word, and Dana White is on the record saying he's next. So I don't know if you want to piss off Sean Strickland going around there that feels like he's been slighted. He might say even crazier things. So yeah, it's all kind of a mess right now. And I think, like usual, it's going to come down to timing and circumstance and all these things. But I think we'll probably find something out sooner or later than here.
You think Dana's regretting his Sean Strickland is definitely next comments after? I mean, I don't understand why he would say that, knowing that Khamzat is about to fight on a big stage with a huge opportunity for a win.
Yep. I mean, that's why he says I don't like to make fights on the night of the fight or give these like bold declarations, say this is definitely a #1 contender fight, because shit can change in overnight in one performance. And then you're like, oh, why did I do that? And usually we would be the people here being like, the UFC should be accountable for its promises to fighters and stuff like that. But you look at the talent of Khamzat Chimaev and you're like, how is that guy fighting for anything but a title next logical?
Yeah, I 100%. I agree. I agree with that part. I just don't know that Dricus calling for it is the smart move. But hey, man, you know, I'm gonna watch. I'm gonna be interested. I just feel like with I just, like I said before on this show, I just feel like Khamzat is destined to be a champion in this division. And whether it's Sean or whether it's Dricus that he were to fight, to me, both those guys just don't really have the quickness or the footwork. Especially Sean Strickland, flat-footed. They don't have it to stop his takedowns. They just don't. I just don't see that happening, and that's why I feel like it's inevitable for him to be a champ, and which is why I feel like Dricus is making a mistake. Get that Sean Strickland fight first. You know what you're going to get from him. Then you face Khamzat Chimaev. To me, that's just the way to go. So. Yeah. Final word, thoughts?
No, I think that's if you're his manager, I think that's probably the exact pitch you give him and tell him what to say. But Dricus does seem like a very hard-headed individual, and he seems confident in his ability. And I think he takes it personally that everyone says he would get whooped in that fight. So he seems to take on a challenge, and far be it from me to count out Dricus Du Plessis again. I've done it
seriously
a million times. So like, who the hell am I to say he'll probably go in there?
Yeah, I know. And I will say too, even though this is my reaction to him calling out, I will say mad props and respect to Dricus for not pulling, a Sean O'Malley or something who wanted to fight somebody else before Merab, right? Like he's like, hey, I'm going to fight. I want to fight Khamzat now. So mad respect. I just don't think it's very smart, but I will be intrigued to see that fight. So
no doubt.
All right, man. One more thing on this edition of the show we're going to cover here. Hey, Stipe Miocic. We haven't heard from Stipe in a while, man. I mean, he's been pretty quiet for the past few months. He finally did an interview. I think a couple interviews, but he did an interview with Jake Paul. He was on BS with Jake Paul, and they were talking about the fight coming up in just a couple of weeks against Jon Jones. And he said, Jon Jones does a lot of good things, but I have great coaches, great teammates, and they make me prepared for whatever happens. I'm not going to wait for what he's going to do. I'm going to do what I want to do. Some strong stuff there from Stipe. Let me just give you a reminder here, though, Mike. Stipe has no chance of beating Jon Jones. He's got no chance, man. I mean, he's 42 years old. The chin can't possibly be there. He's slow. I don't see this going Stipe's way, man.
Yeah, I know. I want to respectfully, Stipe, it's an overreaction. Realistically, is like my analyst hat. Yeah, it's not. I feel like we're just going to New York in a couple weeks for like a coronation / goodbye of like whatever Jon Jones's career is. I don't know. Maybe they'll surprise us and that won't be the case. But yeah, like you see some of the promotional materials coming out and it's like they're using photos of Stipe Miocic beating Fabricio Verdum in like 2017. The back banners have EA UFC 2 branding on them. We're waiting for like EA UFC 6 to come out next year. So that just goes to show how long it's been. Yeah. Dude, put it in this way. The dude has never worn a Venom kit. He's only worn a Reebok kit. He hasn't fought in the Venom era. So like,
that's how long it's been.
Yeah. So there's all these things. I mean, I think it's like the longest layoff a person has ever had coming into a UFC title fight, like, which is crazy. So there's all these elements that like aren't, you know, very good. I saw, I think Ben the Bane Davis tweet out like a modified poster of what the UFC put, and it's like, you know, longest layoff versus like longest layoff for a title. All these things skewing the stats to make them seem like very rude around this fight, but it's also pointing out the realities. So yeah, like, as fascinating and convincing as that Stipe Miocic quote is, with just so much insight there that he's going to do what he wants to do and the opponent isn't going to be able to do what he wants to do. I think that's what every fighter would say their plan is for every single fight. So I don't know, like, I don't think we're going to get much insight. I'm curious to hear more from Jon as we get closer, but I think it's going to be a lot of the same generic kind of quotes from him too, because that's the type of guy he is. That press conference should be, I don't know, short, maybe a little dull, but yeah, we'll see. In terms of the actual fight though, yeah, like I just can't fathom it. Unless Jon, because in fairness to him, like a couple serious shoulder surgery, elbow surgery, a lot of time off, like maybe he slips on a banana peel, but skill for skill, I just can't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I could even see a path to victory for Stipe if he was 3 years younger. You know, if this was like Stipe in his prime against Jon Jones in his prime, you know, like just taking where they're at and their age and the difference in their ages. If we were to rewind this, you know, 5 years ago, I don't even know that I see a path to victory with Stipe against Jon there. Now, 42 years old, coming off the knockout, you know, talking about retirement too. Like, is he even really all there mentally into this fight? I mean, I know he says he is, but is he really? Like, I don't see it.
You do hear from some people that, like, you know, he is bringing in good training partners and stuff like that. Like, I think he is doing it the right way. He knows, like, he's not a dumb guy. He might be not the most insightful when like a microphone is put in front of him, but he has resources. He knows how to do a high level training camp. But yeah, how is his body holding up through that camp? Things like that. The one thing I guess you can say is, like, it is heavyweight. You know, anything can happen in there with these guys who hit hard. He obviously can pack a punch, but like, if that's your whole selling point of being like, you know, puncher's chance, it is heavyweight and that increases more so than every division. Sure. But it's not like we've ever had any questions about Jon Jones's chin either. Like, he's now with Max Holloway being knocked out. He has the second most UFC fights without being knocked down or knocked out behind Cheeto. So we've kind of seen his durability there. So it's not like you wonder like, oh, his chin is kind of being sus over the years. Maybe he'll get caught. There's not even really that argument.
Yeah. I mean, listen, maybe I'll amend my reaction to, instead of having no chance, he's got a puncher's chance. But man, that seems to me like it would have to be one lucky punch, man. Because I expect Jones to be, you know, still have the speed, the quickness, the elusiveness. He's got the length. He's got the reach. Like, he's going to have all those advantages to you know, in this fight.
He does not have the punching power advantage, though. You could at least say that.
I could say that. We could say that. Like, him knocking out, but here's the thing though, Stipe's chin is 42 years old now.
Yeah,
you know, he hasn't really felt a punch since 2021, so he doesn't really necessarily have to have the puncher's advantage, the power advantage. That's the thing. Yeah,
he's got the striking accuracy too, right? Like, we saw his head kicks are obviously deadly. We saw that with Cormier, although that result was overturned. So yeah, it might not be like a knockout punch from Jon, but if he puts him down, I'm guessing it would probably be with like a kick or a knee.
Yeah. That's probably what it'll be. And maybe it ends up with some type of submission, you know, coming out of that.
Most likely. Like, I mean, you look at him, he's training with Gable Stevenson, Gordon Ryan and stuff. Like, I don't think there's going to be a huge secret to the game plan there. But Stipe's takedown defense isn't bad either. Not many people try to do that to him. So there is, I don't know, I'm talking myself into be slightly more intrigued.
You see what this show does to you?
2 years, and now it's 2 weeks away, and I'm like, oh, maybe it's a little bit interesting. I don't know.
That's what this show does to you, man. See, I get you talking about your my overreaction, and oh, wait a minute. First of all, yeah, initially it was not an overreaction. Now you've come around. Yeah. But it is not an overreaction, dude. I just don't see it happening. But hey, we're 2 weeks away, and we'll find out soon enough.
Yep.
All right. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. Mike, I hope you enjoyed yourself on the show for the first time. Oh, yeah. Everything was good?
Oh, yeah, it was great.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, everybody, I appreciate you guys for watching the last 2 weeks, for watching this late on this episode. Very much so appreciate you. And we will see you guys next time on Overreaction Time. So long.
MMA Junkie AI.